start the Q&A, I've got a few questions to start us off, and then if there are questions from the audience, we can move over to your questions. I guess, Olivia, my first question really is if you could talk a little about what drew you to a project on Melville, what prompted your interest?
Well, it's a project I had since more than 10 years, I must say. I made a PhD thesis about Melville at university in Aix-en-Provence, and it was I finished it in 2000, so it's more than 8 years. And I remember after finishing, it was not about Melville's life at all. It was only an aesthetic thesis, but the day I finished it, and I have to present it to my teachers. One of them, who was specialized in historia, not at all in cinema, just said, "Well, you're always speaking about war in Melville cinema, but what did he do during the war? Nobody knows. Maybe he never did the war. Maybe he's just pretending he's done something." Because actually Melville has really said just a few things about what he did. He said some things to Renoir, but very, very little things, and nobody knew. And as he was someone who liked a lot to tell stories, he might have lied. And I thought, well, this is a very interesting question. Let's try to find what he did really. Well, it took me, I would say, more than 3 years to know a little bit more about it. And the idea of a documentary about it came after 1 year of searching about that, and it took me after more than 5 years to produce it and direct it.
I'd be really interested to hear a little more about that process and how you found out, how you tracked down the story of what Melville did in the war and his family, and maybe a little bit about the process of making the film.
Okay, well, I must say that I've been very helped by every of single friends of Melville you've seen in the movie. Each one of them told me a little thing who could help me to find a little bit more of his story. Leo Fortel, for an example, who was with probably the one who knew Melville the more. He knew him before the war, so it was very important to be sure that Melville was really a soldier, that he was really a resistant. Of course, it was very important. Melville's family, his wife and his nephews, Laurent and Rémi, that you've seen in the movie, have been important. Not that they knew so much about Melville, but because they helped me to find in archives, mostly at the army in France, to open to the files and find what could be there. So they made me a lot of letters that I could see the papers and all that. And in that way I discovered, for example, a complete interview of Melville when he arrived in London, which happened for everyone who arrived in London to know if they were not spies, because some of them were spies coming from Vichy. And he told his whole story, how he left Spain, how he arrived in Gibraltar, and his prisons in Spain and all that. And Rémi and Laurent, who was reading part of this interview, had never heard about it before reading it the day of the shooting. So it was something very, very important. And concerning his brother, which is the first time I really understood there was a story to tell. It is the first thing I learned about his past, the story of his brother. And it can seem a little bit like a cliché, but I've been working that much on his films that I wanted to see the place he was buried. And he was buried in Paris, not exactly in Paris, a little bit outside. And I decided one afternoon to see the grave, which can seem a little bit stupid, but well, I wanted to see it.
It strikes me as I watch it that you're clearly very interested in the relationship between cinema and politics and French post-war culture and the impact of the war. And it seems like one of the really striking things about Melville is that he demonstrates the complexity of that history and of those positions. He doesn't seem to fit very well into some of the more obvious patterns of French post-war film that takes on the war. And I wonder maybe if you could talk about that a little.
Yes, for sure. For me, the interest of the documentary is to show the complexity of things, not giving answers every time, but showing that things are really complex. And for that generation, for sure, it was really complex. As Melville is saying it himself, he could have been a former collaborationist. He was not because he was Jewish, but it was so complex. And he used to say that he felt a lot of pity for all the people who were 20 years old during the war and made the wrong choice, because he could have made also a choice which was not at all the one of becoming a soldier and fighting for free French forces. That complexity, which goes with politics, is what really interests me, because I think that French culture is something a little bit special. I don't know in England, but for sure after the war, and with the new wave and cahiers de cinéma, cinema became something really important as a cultural point in France. It had always been, but it became really something important. And those people who, in a way, took the power of speaking about movies and directors, made the people believe some things they believed, for sure, but we were sometimes wrong. And the case of Melville is very interesting on that point, because he began as the father of the new wave, and he finished really being hated by the same. I think it's between 62 and 66 they began to write really terrible things about him, finishing with Army of Shadows, saying that it is a dangerous movie. And it had a lot of importance. Why? Because, of course, 69, the Army of Shadows is just coming out after Mai 68, May 68, which was very important in France. But that generation of May 68 took the power at this time and decided to change things, which is very important and very interesting. But they had to kill a few fathers during that period, that time, and Melville was one of them. But it remained like that. I remember myself when I decided to write my PhD thesis about Melville. No one had ever wrote anything about him at university in France. It was in 2000, more than 40 years later. I had never seen one of his movies at university, not a teacher had even shown me a part of his movies. That is really important. I thought that's misunderstanding, a completely misunderstanding of his work, because he is not an old fascist, for sure. When you just have to see Army of Shadows, it is about friendship, it is about morality, it is about resistance, but it's not a fascist movie. You can be sure of that. And I'm very glad I read an article or an interview of Jacques Rivette 2 or 3 years ago, and he said, well, I've just seen Army of Shadows a few weeks ago, and I think we all mistook. It's a brilliant movie, and we should see all those movies again. So, well, it took more than 30 years to talk about Melville in France as someone important and someone with a real morality, and with the choices he made, being communist first and then joining De Gaulle. A lot of them made it. Malraux made it, and a lot of them. Yeah, well, it could be time to speak about all those people who actually are not fascist at all. And I am preparing, producing, not directing, another documentary about another French director who is Pierre Schoendorfer, who is not very famous abroad, but he was an operator during